G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
Well, welcome everybody. Today we're talking with Mick, and the topic that we're going to be covering is surviving tough times. I guess the last few years has been pretty challenging, particularly with COVID creating a lot of disruption. And what we're seeing now is the economy itself is starting to get much tougher in terms of there's still some uncertainty around COVID and disruptions that can cause, particularly to staffing. But we're starting to see inflation really take off around the place and interest rates rising pretty quickly, as well as some real challenges still in some supply chains, and certainly skills shortage is a common theme. So I guess anything we can do to prepare our businesses is going to be helpful. So Mick, what can you tell us about preparing for tough times?
Thanks, Rob. Yes, certainly, and arguably there's some challenges ahead, and talking, continually with business owners, I think that's definitely the general consensus. And ironically, the last couple of years, even battling a pandemic, a lot of businesses have done very well. So it's making sure, the next few years, or hopefully not any longer, businesses can take steps to survive those challenging times ahead. And I've come up with sort of 9 steps that can possibly help every business, maybe more than others and less with others. But so I'll walk through those, and Rob can have some comments as well. So the first one I look at is review game plan. So, like any sporting teams, and I love the analogies of sporting teams, being a sports nut, every team has a game plan. So it's making sure you've got a game plan, and in the context of your business, that's as much a strategy and a business plan. If you don't have one, then certainly, start working on one. So if you've got one, make sure you sort of review it and make sure it all stacks up in the changing business environment. And the game plan, like I said, consists of many aspects, but looking at making sure, why your business exists. Is that sort of consistent with your purpose? What is your mission? Where you're going? What's your vision? How you're going to get there? Your team goals, making sure you got performance metrics for all your people, and process procedures, which are all sort of foundational pieces around a business, but often overlooked or underappreciated. And no doubt, Rob, working with many small businesses, you would agree with those sort of aspects.
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you don't know where you're going, it's a bit hard to know if you're going in the right direction, whatever the environment brings. So I think that's a good one to kick off with.
Yes, and sort of aligned to that is your business model. So how does your business work? From where you get opportunities, lead opportunities and new customers or clients, through to the collection of your of payments from your customers, and making sure that you're very clear on why your customers value your goods and services, and making sure if you're not 100% sure on that question, then making sure you revisit that, and making sure you can niche down your target market as best as possible. So if you're looking to please everybody in whatever you sell, but services or products, then typically you're only average. And there's a saying I love that riches are in the niches. And from experience working with businesses, they are the ones that really outperform their competitors.
Yep, I think that's a good point.
Often I think in challenging times, one of the first costs that business owners look at is the marketing spend. And this is probably might not seem logical, but the best marketing brains recommend against this. And a friend of Grow a Small Business, Mark Ritson, who Troy interviewed in a recent podcast, is certainly one of those marketing gurus that certainly recommends not necessarily decreasing your marketing spend. You might be more strategic in how you go about it, but certainly the majority tend to reduce their marketing spend, and that's where the opportunity lies. And I think with any marketing, and if you're not doing it now, having as many metrics around the return on investment as best as possible.
Yep.
So the next one is all around communication. You can never over communicate with your team. Keep them in the loop with hopefully positive news, but also if there's some challenges ahead, making sure you're communicating that and getting their involvement in navigating through the months ahead. So making sure you've got an appropriate communication structure where there's transparency around the communication. Everybody's clear on their metrics, their performance metrics as a team and individual. And, you know, you're talking about wins, losses, learnings, and focused on what's ahead as far as the business plan, to make that game plan, making sure they're involved and engaged with it, and everyone working together in that regard. So, Rob, have you got any sort of thoughts and experiences in that context?
I was going to say, Mick, I think that's good practice in good times and bad. I guess, do you see any sort of key differences there when times get tough versus good times?
Well, I think the key one is not necessarily sugarcoat things. I think, and I think that comes back to the transparency and the values and the relationships that you've got. So hopefully in your business, you know, you've got you've got some good relationships within the business, and that open communication is there. I think once you start hiding information and trying to protect your team, that sometimes can be more divisive than positive.
That's a good point.
It certainly, and typically business will sort of revolve to reviewing costs in a business in hard times. We spoke about marketing, not necessarily, you know, cutting the guts out of your marketing, just be more strategic, but certainly making sure, you know, cutting costs, but making sure you're cutting the right costs. So it's really just, I find a good process working through each line in your profit and loss as far as expenses, and challenging the value around each item. So therefore, you're making sure you are cutting costs in the right areas.
Yeah.
Find it hard to define a clear strategy, then communicate it and execute it alongside the rest of your team? Or you currently don't work a simple quarterly strategic plan to boost your team's performance? Our Business Growth Formula online course is perfect for small business owners with 5 to 30 team members wanting to grow. We share the mindsets, habits and tools to be a legendary leader in your business. growsmallbusiness.com.
And I guess looking at those investments in your business that are potentially making your business stronger from a strategic point of view, continuing to invest in those, whereas expenses that perhaps don't have as much strategic value long term are ones that you could look at going a little bit harder on if you're looking to cut expenses.
Correct. Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
Another one is reviewing or introducing a dashboard of metrics. So I'm certainly big on making sure businesses have a dashboard of metrics around, their key drivers.
Yeah.
So I guess making sure you understand what your key drivers are and what impact they have, measuring those key drivers regularly, at the very least weekly, potentially even daily, depending on your business. Because the old saying, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. There's never a truer saying. So I start with the key drivers of your business and what can make the biggest impact, and start measuring them if you're not already doing it.
Yep.
And if you have got a dashboard, a good time to just reflect on it and make sure it is useful and you are using it, not just as the business owner, but everybody across the business as a team.
Excellent. Sounds good.
So the last three is review your financial facilities is one of the last three. I think, again, particularly with interest rate rises that have happened as we record this, but potentially more to come. It's making sure, one, you've got the right funding facilities in place for moving forward with the right terms. And I think if you've got a good relationship with your banker, reach out to them if you haven't already. If you don't necessarily have a relationship, I recommend you use a finance broker and using their network and expertise to make sure that's in place for moving forward. And sort of aligned to that is making sure you've got a robust cash flow forecast for at least the next 12 months. And when I say robust, not just putting numbers on a page, actually having some data behind the numbers, particularly in revenue, which comes back to your dashboard of KPIs. So use those dashboard KPIs to actually prepare a cash flow forecast. And that way you can use it then to run some scenarios around, if X would happen, what is the impact? And certainly, banks and lenders, very big on cash flow forecasts. And if you've got one and you're going to your banker, then certainly they look at you in a much better light than someone that doesn't. But regardless, a critical tool in any times, but particularly in the challenging times ahead.
Yeah, okay. So what you're saying there is you're looking at the drivers of your revenue, for example, number of customers and average spend, to inform how your cash flow forecast might unfold. That's
right. That's a good example.
Yep.
So, you can then at least, you've got some, science around the numbers rather than just, last year we generate 100,000 in cash flow this month, and we'll just say it's going to be 90 or whatever the figure is.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And the last one is somewhat related to reviewing a cost, but particularly to your people and your team members. I know Troy talks about this, and certainly a lot of the podcasts and the business owners he interviews is around not having B players on your team or worse, but looking to have A players. So sometimes in these challenging times ahead where we've got economic headwinds, it is sometimes a good opportunity to let go of those B or C players.
Yep.
And making sure you got just A players, where everyone's living your core values every day and working as a team, because you can't afford to have individuals on the team anytime. But I think that's heightened in times where there's economic challenges as we're currently experiencing.
No, that's really good, Mick. So just to reiterate the 9 steps, as of trying to keep up with you, noting as we go. But the first one being your game plan. The second one, reviewing your strategy and business plan, or was that the same one?
Your business model.
Your business model, sorry. Your business model. Looking at your marketing spend clarity of communication, reviewing dashboard and metrics, reviewing your financial facilities, reviewing your cash flow forecast, and people and team. No B players going forward. Did I catch them all there?
Covers beautifully, Rob. And we're looking to provide an ebook at some point in the not too distant future with a bit more information around those 9 steps that we can share with small business owners.
Well, thanks very much for those tips, Mick. I think if I had to pull out a couple of actions on that, the first one is consider a worst case or perhaps a bad scenario that could hit your business over the next 12 months. And the second action is, once you've thought about that, how might you adjust your cash flow forecast, particularly thinking about some of your expenses and outgoing cash, to manage that scenario? So it may be a case of cutting some expenses, managing some of your payment obligations, or potentially looking at new revenue streams. But certainly plenty to think about there around how we might manage tough times going forward. So thanks again, Mick.
And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.